Welcome back to Major Antonio's presentation of The Yankee Mining Squadron by Reginald Belknap. Chapter 13, Signals.
Signals had come well to the front in the course of the first excursions, not only for tactics, but also for assembling data quickly, so that a fairly comprehensive report of the excursion might go to headquarters by the first boat to shore after arrival. Spelling out messages by Morse or semaphore proved too slow and inaccurate for reports from 9 ships in one afternoon, often in hazy weather. So a collection of phrases and questions to be answered by reference number was established to be signaled by hoists of flags. As we had expected to use the British signal system, a special training class was formed at Newport in January, while the mine layers were fitting out. In consequence, from first falling in with British destroyers, the San Francisco communicated easily, and British flags could be used on the first excursion. But neither the British system nor our own was found to suit our needs, and to combine British flags with American meanings made a risk of misinterpretation at a critical time. So the American flags were restored to use, and the British ones discontinued, except a few retained by each ship for calls and other routine uses, while the flagship kept a full set for communicating with the escort by the British code. A new system, embodying several of the British features, was devised, mainly by Lieutenant Commander E.S.R. Brandt, then Flag Lieutenant, and was put into effect on the second excursion. The main feature was that the meaning of tactical signals, those which required immediate action affecting the ship's movements, was self-evident to anyone who knew the names of the flags. Flags and associations already familiar having been utilized, the signalman quickly learned. Separation among 3 anchorages prevented signal practice by the squadron as a whole in port, but drills several times daily at each anchorage and on the way out to the mining ground enabled the new code to be used on the full squadron's first trip. Great interest was evident among the signal forces of all ships. Signals were habitually hoisted only just long enough, as determined by experience, for the average vessel to repeat the hoist. Competition became keen not to be the cause of delay, and very soon the signaling attained an accuracy, rapidity, and style comparing favorably with the best performance of any type of vessel. Once or twice the Quinbog, whose mast was not high, beat the flagship in getting her own signal up to the yardarm. Less than a minute by day, and often only 30 seconds, would suffice between giving an order for a tactical signal and beginning its execution by the squadron, without a glance at a key book or card at either end. Most efficient telephone service would hardly equal that. The Vampire soon picked up our new system, so that signals to her could frequently be dispensed with. Upon one of ours going up, the corresponding British signal on Vampire would be seen in a few moments. Accuracy of transmission and of record being very important, where so much was done by signal, these were stimulated by daily comparison of the signal records of all ships. A discrepancy sheet was compiled to show the errors and omissions of each ship for the previous day, and directly after each excursion, the signal officers would meet to compare the signal records of the trip. A further check was kept by a staff officer being constantly on watch on board the San Francisco when at sea, taking notes upon incidents and errors in signals, station keeping, and the behavior of ships. The recording angel could not have been more observant. I would edit the rough record at the end of a watch, references to the pertinent instructions were entered, and a smooth discrepancy report was sent to all ships at the end of the excursion as a reminder of their sins. Had the signal officers been regulars and but one system of signals been in use from the beginning, the high standard maintained would have been commendable. The attainment of such a standard by inexperienced personnel, adopting a new system on very short notice, was highly creditable to all concerned. Especially should there be mention of Chief Quartermaster William H. Cairns of the San Francisco and the other chiefs, whose training and management of their signalmen and whose own skill and fidelity made our quick and accurate communication possible.
Chapter 14, The Barrier Across.
The Barrage began to show results early in July, after our second excursion, although not yet half across. The enemy submarines changed their route then, so as to go through Fair Island Channel, south instead of north of the Shetlands. Thus they would pass west of the partial barrage, through the 60-mile-wide passage still open. The fact of Area A having been proclaimed gave ample warning, and even the enemy could not complain of being ambushed if he sustained damage there. Advertising a minefield 2 months in advance was certainly fair play. But now came the mining of Area B, which would carry the barrier clear across the last 45 miles of the 230-mile stretch. This was not published, but the enemy might have assumed that it would be done sooner or later. A joint excursion by the two squadrons was arranged, Rear Admiral Strauss commanding the whole, flying his flag on board San Francisco again. The squadrons joined off the Middle Orkneys the morning of 7th September and began the mine laying a few miles to the northward, starting from a buoy placed by HMS Laburnum and removed by her after we had passed. As we were directly in the submarine's thoroughfare, special patrols were provided, surface and air, in Fair Island Channel and also well to the southward of us. The American squadron planted 6 upper-level lines. The British squadron planted 1 similar line, after the completion of which it separated to the southward, returning to its base at Grangemouth, Firth of Forth. On the way, one of them had a collision in the fog with a destroyer of its escort, which later sank in consequence. Our squadron turned north at the end of our minefield, ran taut wire to buoy number 5, thence paralleled the minefield at 5 miles distance for observation of defective mine explosions, steering west to the Orkneys and returning to the base on the reverse of the outbound courses. Fog came on soon after mining was finished, continuing intermittently until we made port. For this reason, San Francisco did not cut her taut wire at buoy 5, but kept it running until the squadron slowed to take in Paravanes, near Cromarty, 122 miles of wire run out without a break. The succeeding excursion was similar, with Rear Admiral L. Clinton-Baker, R.N., in HMS Princess Margaret, in command of the whole force, Rear Admiral Strauss again on board San Francisco. On the way out, it was not permitted to pass between the Orkneys and the western end of the minefield planted just previously, but instead, the squadrons were routed northwestly through Stronsay and Westray Firths in the Orkneys, thence eastly through Fair Island Channel, and down to within 5 miles north of the other minefield. While standing through Stronsay Firth in a long, single column, the British squadron, which was in the lead, opened fire on its starboard quarter, its escorting destroyers gathering to drop bombs about a certain spot. Upon signal from the Princess Margaret, the starboard wing destroyers of our escort speeded ahead to join the attack, but the port wing destroyers remained on station, although the leading squadron's destroyers had left theirs. In a few moments, a submarine broached about 1,500 yards, 2 points on San Francisco's starboard bow, heading across to port through the column between the two squadrons. Some destroyers followed and continued bombing. Smoke screens were laid by our escort, Vampire, Captain Godfrey, and 11 others of 14th Flotilla, and by our own ships, which thus had a good test for their smoke outfits. Roanoke chanced to have a steering engine disablement just at this moment, causing her to sheer out and shift to hand gear, and the Housatonic also had some steering trouble, but there was no mishap, and the submarine also for the time escaped. By good luck, an official photographer happened to be on board San Francisco, and he got some pictures of genuine activity. A delay at the morning rendezvous, the long-distance roundabout, and adverse current combined to make a late mining start. While the mining was in progress, the bodies of 2 German sailors were passed, and a heavy explosion was observed in the 8th minefield, 5 miles distant, in a position that plotted in the same place a submarine would be, which had been reported shortly before. Darkness shut in about an hour before planting was completed, but it caused no suspension nor interference. At the end of the field, buoys were dropped as usual, and all ships together turned left, without signal but on orders given before dark, to the course north, then formed in 2 columns for the run home. The British and American squadrons had now separated, and they passed back through Westray Firth in succession after daylight next morning. Off Pentland Skerries, a suspicious craft ahead caused another submarine alarm, and the escort again enveloped the squadron in a smokescreen, but the alarm proved false. This time, the 10 American vessels had planted 6 lines, 2 at each of the usual levels, 46 miles long, 5,520 mines in all, the maximum of any excursion. The 4 British vessels planted 1 line at deep level, 1,300 mines, 32 miles long, making altogether 6,820 mines on the excursion, the largest single minefield ever planted, done in 3 hours and 50 minutes. Upon returning to the bases, Admiral Strauss signaled, "The Commander Mine Force congratulates the squadron on this biggest and most successful excursion."
Chapter 15, Finishing the Barrier.
The conference at Malta, at which Rear Admiral Strauss was the American representative, recommended extensive mine barrages in the Mediterranean, in locations where the depths of water were much greater than any yet mined, involving winter operations for us. As a first step, Captain Murfin was sent down to Bizerta, near Tunis, to establish a base there, like his 2 in Scotland, though under much less favorable conditions. Considerable experimenting at home was likewise involved, to develop a suitable extra-deep mine and its moorings. Experienced personnel being needed for this, orders came placing the Baltimore at disposition of our Naval Bureau of Ordnance for the purpose. Accordingly, on the 10th excursion, 26th of September, she parted company off Scapa Flow, sailing thence 2 days later for home. In the 9 other ships, 97% of the mine capacity remained, but as an experienced vessel of regular man-of-war type, the Baltimore's value in the squadron had far exceeded her proportionate capacity. The mine-laying squadrons were now doubling and trebling the Barrage, which had been carried clear across the North Sea on the 8th excursion, 7th of September. Hitherto, we had been favored by good weather, but the season of frequent storms was approaching, and already the lengthening hours of darkness made a considerable difference. Our one loss of life at sea occurred just as the Baltimore left us. The Saronac's port paravane was running badly, and in clearing it, George C. Anderson, chief boatswain's mate, stepped out on the davit. A sudden jerk, and he was gone. Although search was made, he was never seen again. He had been an energetic yet safe leader, never allowing another man to go overside without a bowline around him, but of himself had been less careful. An almost unbroken record of 10 excursions carried through without breakdown or delay made such a performance now seem a matter of course. The artificer personnel of all ships made a fine showing in upkeep and in steady steaming at sea, notwithstanding that overhaul time was very limited. On returning to port, the squadron would prepare immediately for another excursion and would then wait from day to day for the escort, under notice too short for the extensive overhaul desirable. As the operation progressed, making more wear and tear, the intervals between excursions became shorter, and bad weather frequently necessitated keeping steam ready in case the anchors dragged, as often they did, all which reduced the repair time. Unfinished details of conversion, hard usage in former hands, absence of spare feed pumps and similar secondary dependencies, and a large amount of auxiliary machinery for the vessel's size, all these were work-making factors. Yet, except for wear, the general condition of all machinery steadily improved. A large amount of self-repair was done, the Roanoke being almost wholly self-sustaining, resorting very little even to our own repair ship Black Hawk. The San Francisco's carpenter gang built an excellent emergency cabin under the bridge in about 10 days. Then, the Shawmut and Aroostook by themselves increased their oil fuel capacity by 50%, which later enabled them to make the run homeward unassisted and unescorted. Procedure in conducting the squadron aimed at steadiness in steaming and steering. No unnecessary chances were taken, but neither was the treatment tender. The ships always worked near their speed limit, with only the reserve needed for tactical reasons. Their good performance was due to careful, intelligent foresight, and the rarity of even minor disablements is proof of noteworthy ability and fidelity on the part of the engine and fire room personnel. No ship was ever late, no mine-laying operation ever interrupted, only one hot bearing occurred. Only once did a ship's engine have to stop, for but a few minutes, in 8,400 miles steaming. As for steady station keeping, some ships, notably Canandaigua, were always there, hour after hour, night and day, and the others were seldom out. Approaching and during the mine laying, they were very accurate. As one visiting officer from the fleet said, "You've got it on the battleships." And it was officially reported by Admiral Mayo that, quote, "The mine layers, though of diverse types, maneuvered well together and kept station very well indeed. They appeared to be under excellent control, both individually and as units, at all times." The laying operation which was witnessed was carried out according to plan without hitch of any kind, thus indicating the efficacy of the preparation, including planning, and the thorough understanding of the work by all concerned. Unquote. Much official interest was taken in our operation, and brief visits to the bases and the ships were made during the summer by Vice Admiral Sims, Admiral Sir Rosslyn Wemyss, the British First Sea Lord, Vice Admiral Omni of the Admiralty, Rear Admiral Clinton-Baker, RN, the House of Representatives Naval Committee, and Assistant Secretary Franklin D. Roosevelt. Several of our naval officers went out on excursions, and Lieutenant Commander DeSalis, RN, always a welcome, enthusiastic supporter, went on several of them. They all admired the orderly, complete, and ample arrangements of the mine-assembling bases and were especially complimentary about the new mine layers. Officers and men felt intense pride in their ships and spared no effort to keep them in regular man-of-war condition. The 10 made a handsome squadron, and in capacity for carrying mines, in equipment for handling and planting them continuously, and general arrangement and quality, the new American mine layers were admittedly superior to any others. Their capacity and performance was the subject of much favorable comment and careful study by the British Admiralty. Besides large mine capacity, their mine elevators were a striking feature. The very first thing considered in the plans had been how to get the lower deck mines up to the launching deck, so that a ship's entire load might be planted in one unbroken string. The Otis Elevator Company's representatives had been called in at the outset, and after several alternatives had been examined, their standard platform type was decided upon, each elevator lifting 2 mines every 20 seconds. 6 elevators in the 4 largest ships, 4 in 2 others, were in use 9 months in all kinds of weather at sea. Only one of the 32 elevators ever failed, and that one just once. The British mine layers had had trouble from the mine tracks opening and closing with the working of the ship in a seaway. In ours, the tracks were secured to steel cross ties mounted on wooden bolsters. The strength and stiffness of the tie, with the elasticity of the bolster, keeping the rails true to gauge, notwithstanding they were lighter rails than the British used. Special interest was taken also in the simple light switches used in our ship's mine tracks. Some of the Admiralty officials were hard to convince that these switches actually worked, even when operated before their eyes. While the ships were embarking mines and coaling for the 12th excursion, Admiral H.T. Mayo, Commander-in-Chief, Atlantic Fleet, accompanied by Captain O.P. Jackson, his Chief of Staff, Rear Admiral Strauss, and Captain N.C. Twining, Chief of Staff to Vice Admiral Sims, made an informal ship inspection, after which Rear Admiral Strauss published the following, 8th of October, 1918. Admiral Mayo, Commander-in-Chief, left the headquarters of the mine force yesterday evening for the south. He expressed himself as highly pleased with the zeal, loyal cooperation, and efficiency of the mine force both ashore and afloat, and congratulated us on the work we have accomplished. The commander of the mine force is unable to give any data as to the number of enemy submarines that have been destroyed as a result of our efforts, but it is practically certain that the toll is considerable. The commander-in-chief emphasized the part that the mine force is taking against the enemy as a distinct military offensive, thoroughly known and appreciated at home. Unquote. Admiral Mayo found things in their normal condition, with no preparation made for him, as some ships were coaling, others embarking mines. He was evidently pleased with all that he saw, and he remarked how fortunate it was that we had been training in that kind of work in the old small mine force for 2 years past. Bad weather during some part of an excursion became now the rule. Coming through a narrow passage in Westray Firth one morning, strong tide against a strong wind made an ugly cross sea, knocking us down to 8 knots. One destroyer broached to, and for a few moments lay between our columns, wallowing heavily, as if the next roll would surely take her under. Shortly afterwards, One arm of the Quinnebog's rudder quadrant broke, and the other arm bent almost to the point of fracture. Had it too gone, she could not have escaped wreck on the rocky channel side. Fortunately, she was able to gain partial shelter. In 2 hours, she made repairs, and taking after the rest at top speed, she arrived at Invergordon only 45 minutes behind them. As a coastwise merchant liner, she was often behind time, but in naval hands, she developed speed to spare, frequently maintaining on natural draft 10% more than her former best speed under forced draft. Passing mines adrift was a frequent occurrence. Occasionally, we would have to turn out for them. If of the moored type originally, broken away from their anchors, they should be safe when drifting. But of course, safety devices, like all others, not infrequently fail to function, especially after immersion in seawater. We let the mines alone, but occasionally an escort destroyer would fire a few rounds to sink them. A German floating mine, upon one occasion, was sighted nearly ahead by the Quinnebog at a moment when her port paravane, running foul, had been hauled in to clear it. Thrown overboard bodily, the paravane fell on its back and, fortunately, righting itself, came in contact with the floating mine, which apparently had a mooring line attached to it, and towed it along with the ship for probably 30 seconds when the mine detached itself and floated astern. While this was going on deck, a fire broke out below, in the midst of the mines on the stowage deck. The ship's cooks, who were in the galley at work, with the greatest promptness, seized hand fire extinguishers, climbed over between the mines, and extinguished the flames. The Quinnebog started planting within 2 minutes after this danger was averted. How such a fire would have spread in one of these ships, so full of woodwork, was shown on board the sister ship Saranac after our return in January 1919 at Hampton Roads. The very night after discharging her mines, a fire broke out, spreading with such rapidity that the sleeping officers had to escape in their night clothes, losing all their effects, and the men in the engine room were barely able to attend the pumps without suffocation. The longest single minefield on record was the 12th, laid on the 13th October, first an 8.5-mile stretch 5 lines wide, then 65 miles 3 lines wide, 73.5 miles in all. It was begun at 7:33 a.m. and finished at 2:52, over 7 hours. In the latter part, we ran closer than usual to the adjacent field to keep inside the proclaimed barrage limits. That night, steaming at easy speed so as not to make the entrance to Westray Firth before daylight, radio orders were received from the Commander-in-Chief, Grand Fleet, about 11 o'clock, to proceed with dispatch into Westray Firth. Other messages were intercepted, indicating that enemy vessels were out, and as we passed Pentland Skerries next forenoon, an unusually large number of British destroyers and sweepers and an observation balloon were searching that vicinity for mines and submarines. Quiet was returning after a night of greater activity than for a long time.
Chapter 16, The 13th Excursion.
The 13th minefield was to be partly in Area A, extending from its southeast corner across Area C towards Udsire Island, ending at a point 3 miles short of a minefield which the Norwegians had planted around Udsire. All mines were of the upper level, and as the depth varied from 70 to 150 fathoms, 3 kinds of anchors were used, which necessitated special care as to the order in which mines were stowed in the ships. The purpose of this field was to close the gap between the British and American minefields in Area C and the American minefields in Area A, and also to increase the surface obstruction across Area C by 2 more lines of upper-level mines. No duty could surpass this series of mining excursions for interest sustained to the end. The few events and noteworthy features so far mentioned may perhaps seem to conflict with this statement, but the smoothness of operation constantly striven for tended to eliminate interior incidents, and no mere description can ever impart an adequate impression of our experiences. Keen anticipation, attention ever alert, and a sense of adventure were fresh on each occasion. There was sameness enough in the occupations while in port, coaling, cleaning, embarking mines, and liberty in small towns, but life underway meant something doing all the time which everyone felt worthwhile. Until back at the buoy again, inward bound, it was all activity, the hours often crowded, the the whole period sleepless for those in command, never dull for anyone. Only as the anchors went down and the tension relaxed could one realize how fast we were living. To quote a Saranac poet, "They gave us a job we had to do, a little bit risky, yes, that's true, a good deal like work, both night and day, but a darn good game for a man to play." Unquote. From the earliest discussion of the Northern Barrage project, one of its probable developments was, by general acceptance, to draw out the German fleet, and that ever-present possibility gave an added spice to the work. Someone characterized our operations as an important military offensive with a front seat at the Second Battle of Jutland. And at the time of the 13th excursion, it seemed as if the mine squadron might indeed be the bait. Due to the prospect of the German fleet coming out, the squadron was ready a full week before Admiral Beatty could spare a destroyer escort for us. The San Francisco and 6 other planters made this excursion, the Roanoke and Canandaigua being omitted. They had been docking at Newcastle-on-Tyne when the mine embarking was done, and although they returned in time to have joined without altering the loading of the other ships, other considerations, external to our force, determined that they should not go. With Vampire, Captain Godfrey, as escort leader for the 10th time, departure was made from Cromarty Buoy at 1:30 p.m., Thursday, 24th of October. An earlier departure had been first ordered, but a message from the Grand Fleet held us back a few hours. A storm warning was out as we sailed, and that night the storm overtook us, continuing with varying intensity all the next day and night. Friday forenoon, HMS Primrose pointed out and verified buoy number 3, and a lull in the storm gave hope that the mining might be carried out that day, but the wind freshened again before the starting point was reached. The ships rolled deeply with their heavy loads, from 27 to 32 degrees each way, but suffered no damage, and the mine installations stood the severe test very well. Through Friday night, the squadron cruised back and forth 15 miles either side of the buoy, as far as adjacent minefields would permit. We could not afford to go far away from the buoy, as the time within which we must complete the task was limited and was now scant. After the first turn about, the destroyers disappeared in the darkness, and it was a relief to feel that at least they were clear of possible collision. We needed no screen in such weather and could dispense with them for the night. In the morning they were back again, the weather moderated, Vampire pointed out the buoy, and we could proceed. Mining began at 1:27 p.m. and continued according to schedule until 2 hours after sunset. The sea and swell had died out so quickly that conditions were very good for mining. All went smoothly. 3,760 mines were planted, the last 37 miles being over water up to 150 fathoms deep. As the first 4 vessels completed their strings, they were ordered to cross ahead of the remaining planting vessels and take station on the southern wing, off San Francisco's starboard quarter, where they would be clear of the British minefield, which lay just to the north of us. 3 destroyers with high-speed minesweeps out preceded the line of planting vessels until an hour after dark, 5:30 p.m. They then joined the other destroyers to starboard and southward of us. In darkness and in silence except for the mine detonations astern from time to time, the San Francisco, Canonicus, and Housatonic, in line abreast, stood on a half-hour longer to the end of the mining track, with no vessels to sweep or to screen ahead as we drew near the coast. The coastal mountains of Norway and a searchlight playing on the clouds were sighted at considerable distance, but not distinctly enough at any time to make an identified bearing. Udser Island was dimly sighted in the direction expected, but it was too dark to obtain a definite fix, as its light was not burning. On our left was a field of British mines, 8 miles away by the chart, but of uncertain distance, in fact, since storms and the coastal current might have moved some of the mines in the 10 weeks since they were planted or broken some adrift. The ships kept on to within 3 miles, by the chart, of the Norwegian minefield ahead, presumably in place and the mines presumably safe if broken adrift. One lacks, however, the same confidence in other people's mines and minefields as in one's own, and more than the usual relief was felt when our schedule was finished. Then, promptly, all ships and destroyers turned right 90 degrees, again turning right, 5 minutes later, 70 degrees more, to course west by south. The squadron then formed in 2 columns, and when 7 miles clear of the minefield, ran parallel to it on the reverse of the mining course for observation. A curious effect was experienced here, the first occasion where we were heading generally toward a freshly laid field instead of directly away. The vessel's movement through the water towards the mines enhanced the sharpness of shock from the exploding defective ones, to such an extent that both officers and men came on the bridge in real concern, reporting that we must have struck something. It was noteworthy during this 13th excursion that the management of the ships, always good before, continued so, in spite of the heavy weather. About 9 p.m., following a hard squall which came in the midst of a turn, causing the ships to get considerably out of station, 3 successive 90-degree turns were made, and the squadron was then formed, upon signal, in a new order, for more convenience during the rest of the night. All was done in good time, yet without any vessels coming uncomfortably near in the course of it. Next day, the last 2 hours of mining were after sunset, but no lights were shown, nor tactical signal made. All maneuvers at the finish were made at prescribed clock times, in obedience to signals sent before dark. The supporting force sighted us about 1:55 p.m. Friday, 12 miles off, then stood to the westward. About 9:30 a.m. Saturday, a light cruiser of the support communicated, and at 2 p.m. the whole support was sighted again, to the southward, consisting of the 2nd Battle Cruiser Squadron, the 5th Battle Squadron, and the 7th Light Cruiser Squadron. Vice Admiral Pakenham, in HMS Lion, commanding the battle cruiser force, was in command of the whole. This excursion took our squadron farther afield than it had been since June. After the 3rd excursion, all our planting had been done behind a barrier of our own making, or else close to British waters, but on this occasion we were on the exposed side of the whole barrage. Late Sunday night, 27th of October, the squadron returned to port, and by the following Wednesday, 30th of October, all 9 ships were again loaded, and there they waited for 12 days of vile weather, ready for another excursion. The one planned would have completed the 4th system, extending northeasterly from the end of the 12th minefield. But no more mining was necessary, and upon the signing of the armistice, the mines on the launching decks were disembarked from the ships to give more space for the crews. Preparations were then taken up for returning to the United States. Of 6 months in European waters to the date of the armistice, on 33 days, the squadron or some of its ships were underway, steaming in the North Sea more than 8,400 miles. So far as readiness of the squadron was concerned, the excursions could have been made with greater rapidity. Never was an excursion delayed on account of a ship's not being prepared. During the 5 months of mine-laying activity, the intervals between excursions averaged 10 days. The time actually consumed in embarking mines, coaling, and routine overhaul came to less than 4 days, so that 4 excursions a month could have been made, but for the delays incident to manufacture and to considerations external to our force.
This concludes today's reading of the Yankee Mining Squadron, by Reginald Belknap. Join us also the day after tomorrow for the subsequent part. Subscribe to Major Intonio's channel. Thank you for listening, and so long.